Okay, it's time to start the session. Animation in Flutter by Salih Guler. Please give a warm welcome to Salih Guler.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for showing up in the last talk of the DroidKaigi. I really appreciate it. Actually, I wasn't expecting this much people, so I feel really happy. So, who am I? My name is Salih Guler. I'm a Flutter and Android developer from Berlin. I work for an agency called Kalmax Berlin, and we provide software solutions to our clients. And once you're at an agency, you always look for some opportunities or some chances to make better or faster apps because you're working with the clients and you need to have, you are having a budget, so you need to follow that up. And this is how we met Flutter, actually. Like 1 year ago, I started to develop Flutter applications, and now I still develop it. So what is Flutter? Like, how many of you haven't heard about Flutter so far? Oh, really? Okay, so Flutter is the cross-platform development SDK from Google. It's open source, and it is used in Dart language. I will not go deeper on this, but it is the platform that we are focusing on in this talk. And it was really useful in our case because we were using it for multi-platform development. The idea of Flutter is give you an opportunity to create beautiful apps in really short amount of time. And they give you some freedom about creating the views. And the biggest slogan that they came up with was, you don't have to say no to your designer anymore. And the reason was the Flutter rendering engine works super fast. It gives you an opportunity to have 60 frames per second. So your animations are super fluent, and it looks really awesome. So these are some apps made with Flutter. And most of them are using, as you see, custom animations. Yeah, so let's continue with why animations are important. So animations are important because we are working with humans, and humans are visual-driven creatures. So when you have a well-tested and well-defined animation, it can tell more than like 1,000 words in like 5 to 10 seconds to your users. And when you have these animations, your job would be easier because your app would have higher user experience level, which is a pretty cool thing to have once you are a developer. So that's why animations are important, and that's why I decided to focus on this topic. So let's start with the real topic now. So in Flutter, animations are mainly divided into two branches. One is tween animations, and the other one is called physics-based animations. So tween word means in-betweening. So you give a beginning and an end value, and it will interpolate itself according to the interpolation level that you provide. And physics-based animations is actually imitating the real life by using the physics rules. Like, we will talk about it later on, but it uses some Newton laws or some spring behavior with using the friction or mass rules from the physics. So if we want to create animations, of course, we need to think about some concepts. And we need to think about some terms that we need to understand before we develop something. In Flutter, everything is turning around from animation objects. An animation object is the primary building block for animation. It doesn't have any idea about what's going on in the screen, but it gives you the information that you need. It doesn't have to be a double or int. You can define a color, you can define an offset or something like this, and it will give you the value according to your needs with the animation that you provide. Animation has a listener, so in each frame change, its listener gets called, and also it has a listener for status. So we have idea about what is the status of the animation. Is it finished? Is it started? Is it in the reverse situation? What is it? So according to that, we can have something going on within our project. But one thing missing from the animation object is we cannot orchestrate it. We need a special animation object to orchestrate the other animations. And here comes animation controller for this. It's an animation. It acts like an animation, but difference is it has some extra method to orchestrate one or multiple animations at once. And it has a default value of 0 and 1, so you don't have to actually create another extra animation if you are working only with doubles at the moment. So that's what we are going to do. So one thing about these slides or this presentation is, actually this is a Flutter application. This is a Flutter desktop application. So every animation that we see here is actually happening via code. So what we are going to see now is how I created this fade transition with only using animation controller. So let's check the code out. Everybody can see it, hopefully. And so in Flutter, the basic building blocks are called widgets. And there are mainly two widget types, like stateless and stateful widget. From the nature of Flutter, because of the performance reasons, all the widgets are immutable. But we need to somehow trigger the changes in our widgets, right? And for these purposes, they have created stateful widget. Stateful widget itself is immutable, but it has a class reference, let's say, that is a state. And in this state, we can make changes and rebuild our widget tree. And this way, we can make changes within our widgets. And for the animations, we are going to use a stateful widget. So what we have here is, I just added an animation controller, which is basically creating an object, animation controller. And in the init state, so in the first situation that your state is created, we initialize our object. We say that this animation controller is taking a vsync. But what is vsync? Vsync is something called ticker provider. Ticker provider is simply your bridge between your frame listeners, I mean the changes in your frame in the platform, because we need to have an idea about how to change 60 frames per second, right? Because we can provide the values, but if we don't have the callback, we will only have the values, but we will not be changing anything. And once the widget tree is recreated again, since we don't have any reference to animation values, it won't change anything. So with this one, with the ticker provider, we are making this happening. There are two types of ticker providers that we can use. One is single ticker provider, which is a case that we can use for if we have only one animation controller. But if we have multiple animation controllers, then we need to have ticker providers state mixing. So in our case, single is enough, so we put it that way. And I put a duration of 500 milliseconds. And one thing is that to my animation controller, I added a listener. As I said, for each frame change, we have a listener. And listener gets called. And what I do here is, in each frame change, I recreate my widget, so it makes the animation behavior for me. And in my build method that I create my view, what I'm doing is I have an opacity widget, which basically changes the opacity of its child. And I give the opacity value from my animation. As we remember, animation control had the default value of 0 and 1, and it will interpolate between these values. And it will get the value from the animation controller and change the opacity according to that. And basically, what the rest does is I added a Flutter logo, and when I click on Flutter logo, it listens to the status. If the status is completed, it reverses it. If it's not completed, it forwards it. And lastly, the important thing is we need to dispose our controller, because we can, meanwhile the animation happening, we can change the widget or something, and it can cut off in the half, and we don't want to waste resources for this, obviously. Yeah, so with this code snippet, we were able to get the fade animation. But there's one thing that is bothering the beginners about this, and it is this part. I mean, if I was a beginner and if I was looking at this code, why do I have to deal with this empty line, empty set state? Why don't they handle it for me? And actually they do. They have something called animated widget. These animated widgets are used for, let's say, mostly single-purpose animations to make them more private. For example, there are different types of animations used: fade transition, slide transition, rotation transition. We will use all of them. But the thing is, it is handling the set state situations for you. And what we're going to do now is, I will show you the. So what I did is, first of all, I create the controller exactly the same way, but only difference is I don't have the listener anymore, as you see. Another thing is I'm using a fade transition. And for the fade transition opacity, I just give my animation object. I don't even give the value. I just give the animation object and say, okay, deal with this. Just give me the fade behavior. And the rest stays the same. And this code turns into this one again. Nothing different, but it looks a bit more cleaner. But in the beginning, I said I was able to change not only double or integers, I should be able to change colors, rect, or some other thing. But animation controller, as I said, only accepts double. And these purposes, then we have tween objects. Tween, as I explained earlier, tween means in-betweening. So it gets a begin value and an end value. And according to the interpolation value that we create, it just interpolates the value that way. But so far, we have only seen, by the way, the tween is, so we can create our own tweens by simply extending the tween class. And we already have pre-created tweens from the Flutter team, like curve tween, color tween, int tween, rank tween. So what we do for this tween is we just give the values that they want from us for the color tween, color, for the integer, int, rect, etc. And it is doing the interpolation for us. But what if we don't want to have linear interpolation? What if I want nonlinear interpolation? Is this possible? Of course. It is possible with curves in Flutter. So these are helping you to interpolate values in a different intervals. And these intervals are calculated by the Flutter SDK itself. You just give the curve type. And according to these graphs, let's say, it is calculating the value and giving you an opportunity to create a better looking animation. Like we have bounce in, bounce out, fast out, slow in, which is like really common curves that is used. What we are going to do is we will see an example of elastic in. So I have two buttons here. One is showing down, other one is showing up. When I click on down, it brings the animation with a small jumping behavior. When I click on up, it does the reverse behavior. And for this one, of course, I promise you that I will show the code. And okay. So let me show you the code for this. So can we take a look? Yeah. Cool. Now I feel better. So what we're going to do here is, again, simply we are going to use the stateful widgets, animation controller, and finally animation object. What I did here is I created an animation controller, and my animation object is a type of offset. So it would interpolate as an offset. I created the animation controller exactly the same way that I created, only I changed from milliseconds to a second. And I created this object with tween, saying that offset from -1. -1 means negative infinity in the top, in the y coordinate in our case, and it will go to the center of the screen. And we said animate this because right now this tween is animatable, so it's open to animate, but it's not animated yet. For this, we are using something called animate, and inside we provide an animation so it can use it to do something. It can use these values to send it to a view or so. So I have this curved animation right now because, as I said, I wanted to have something jumpy. And what I did is I simply put the controller and said curves elastic out. And we don't have to care about this. These are the buttons. I just want to show you this part of the code. I said slide transition, and we can see that this slide transition is an animated widget. As I said, Flutter is giving us an opportunity to use this out-of-the-box things. And what I did is I provided an animation, and I just provided my child, and that's it. Yeah, so far, we have seen really cool animations, but it was only state of 1. But we need to have, we might have staggered animations, like working with intervals or working at the same time. And I promise you that controller can do orchestration for your multiple animations. And for that, we have something called animated builder. So in Flutter, you create your views inside your builder methods or build methods, okay? And with your builder methods, what you do is just provide a widget, and widget tree takes it and puts it in the widget tree. That's it. And it knows how to do the renders. It knows how to render the transition value that you provide. But again, it doesn't know how to create a widget. That's why we provide a widget. So we say that, OK, do the transition, but this is your widget to use. Do the transition for this widget. And for this purpose, what we're going to do here is we will create a simple square. No, of course not. We will create an animation like this. It looks nice. I like it. And so what we are going, as you see, color changes, rotation happens, and they are moving. And I'm going to show you the code for this, because as always said, I promise you the code. So I'm coming back to my stateful widget, OK? And this part is always similar. We have the single ticker provider. We have an animation controller here. And as you see, animation controllers create exactly the same way that we know. What we have extra here is we have a height animation to change the height. We have an angle animation to do the rotation. We have a margin animation because if we change the height only, they will stick together anyway. What we need to do here is provide a padding so they will be looking like they are separated. And we have color animation for, so there are 3 colors of Flutter there. We have one medium color operation, which is this one. One is the regular one, which is this one. And the other one is the mouth, so the dark one. And we have offset animations to move them. So let's see how we created this. So I gave simply 2 values, 70 to 45. But the important thing, the different thing here is, as you see, I have something called interval. So interval is a special object that, so for the interval, your animation happens from bandwidth of 0 to 1. So like it's from 0 to 100%. So you can give some values, some percentages to start from and the end to. What I do here is, from the beginning to the quarter of the time that I gave here, I say do this animation. And I'm doing the same thing for this one. And, sorry. And for the color one, as you see, I give 2 colors. And yeah, this color is just a style from the Flutter. And let's go back. So I'm saying that in the second quarter, change the color animation, right? Just do something with it. And in the third quarter, what I'm doing is simply move the stuff, and that's it. So once we are settled down with this, what we are going to do here is we will go to our animated builder and simply create our widgets, simply create our widgets that we want to show on the screen. So I come here, there's this animated builder, and this animated builder accepts my controller as an animation object to listen to, let's say. And what it does is, so I created a rotation transition because my whole stack is turning. So I'm using a rotation transition to make it turn. And I gave angle animation. As I said, I'm not doing anything extra. I'm just giving rotation transition, which you are going to see that it's only doing the animated widget stuff. And yeah, but I'm just giving this value, and in here I have a slide transition, which makes it slide with the offset. I give the height animation values, color animation values. I mean, I can do different transitions for this, but I didn't want it to stack more widgets up. It's not harm. Flutter is efficient in that way. No problem with that, but I didn't want it to have because of the readability purposes. So that's why we have it like this. And this is just a button. We can ignore this for now. But as I said, with the slide transition plus the animation variables that we created, we can, when we run this code, we can simply have this one. It's that simple. I mean, when you know these terms, it's going very fluently. So let's talk about, I will speed up a little bit. So let's talk about physics-based animations. So physics-based animations, as I said, they're using the physics rules that we learned from the high school or so, and creating some simulations that we can use in our applications. They're not tween, so we are not going to give them duration or stuff because it depends on totally different stuff. It depends on gravity, mass, etc., etc. It doesn't depend on the values that we provide. So what we have here is, this is a gravity simulation, and it's like free falling. As you see, as it goes down, it gets faster. So what we did for this animation is, so I created animation controller without the time constraint. I said unbounded, so it's not bound to anything. And what I did here is, I said animate with gravity. Gravity simulation works with Newton's second rule of motion. So I'm not going to explain this. It's F equals ma. And we give an acceleration. And according to the acceleration that we have, it applies this value, it applies this rule until the endpoint that we provide. And we have spring simulation, for example, acts like a spring, and so on. So Flutter comes with some extra physics-based things that you can use, for example, friction or other stuff too. Okay, so next thing that I really want to talk about is, that's why I went a bit fast, Flare. Flare is the new kid in the block. They announced it in the Flutter Live event. And it's an online tool that you can create 2D vector and animations. Vector animations, actually. And it's really amazing. It's free to use. And you can fork other people's work and see how they work. And it works on a website, works like this. So you can see that there's this tool. You can create your animations with the keys, and you can create your animations in a multiple way. And the idea behind this is they wanted to get rid of the barrier between designer and the developer. And they just wanted to have an extra online thing. And we use it in my company. Our designer does the animation, gives us the Flare file. It has a Flare special file. And for using it, what we are doing is we are simply, just let me show you. What I'm doing is simply, I tell about the Flare file name and run the animation that I created, which is the animation that we can see from this pane. It's the demo mode we are going to play. And this is work like this. Really cool. I really like this one. And when you have SVGs, you can just simply drag and drop there and use the tools for this. So, conclusion. Especially with Flutter, I always say that you don't have to worry about the animations anymore. It's super fun to work with, and once you get the idea, once you get your hands dirty, it goes really fluently. And there are some tools that you can use to create even more animations, and everything that you see in the designs are not impossible anymore. Or even in Android, it's not super impossible, but you spend a lot of time. I know, I do both. In Flutter, you do it more fluently. And it's really enjoy to develop with. And second thing is, with the terms that we know right now, so on internet, we might see some principles like this, right? And with the terms that we learned, we can create an application like this. So this is also a Flutter animation working inside Flutter animation, which is really cool. And so when we click on this, it shows the first animation that we see in the table. Or like third one shows the third one that we see on the table, you know? So and these are, they are open source. You can see it on my GitHub after I publish this. These are all used by the things that I told you. I didn't do anything extra. I didn't even use Flare for this stuff. They are just the stuff. By the way, this is a Spring thing. I mean, they're working really efficient. So, what to do now? So, what to do now? I would suggest to read the introduction document on Flutter.io. Check out the code labs. Check out the Flutter Medium page, especially from this guy, Mikhail Rav. And check my blog post about how I did the other thing that I showed. And just start implementing. I'm sure you will do really, really fast. So I'm on Twitter. If you have any questions, just ask me. I'm also on GitHub. You can create issues or like just directly. Or if you don't like both of them, just email me. I will be fine with that. So, arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you very much for listening.